I would tell you, I've never beat this one rule. Risk correlates to returns. So if you want high returns, you need to take high risk.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the BizDev Podcast, the podcast about developing your business. I'm David Baxter, your host, joined by Gary Voigt. Hello. You are very glowy today.
I'm glowy. I'm glad you
That
remember
shirt
my
is
name,
intense,
though.
man. I don't remember
Okay.
your name. I try to forget you as soon as possible. You know, I had a podcast without you last week, and it was glorious.
Yeah, I heard it. And if that's the case, then I could just dip out after this one.
That's cool. Sweet, sweet. More importantly, we are joined by Jonathan Rhyne, who is the co-founder and CEO of Nutrient. Hello, Jonathan. How are you?
Hi, guys. Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So tell me about Nutrient. Tell me what you're involved in. You've been doing this for 10 years, so no longer a startup. You are now a fully fledged company. Tell me about Nutrient.
Yeah, which is new for me. We actually rebranded to Nutrient just under 3 months ago. Our company actually was a mixture of probably 5 different companies, which also tells you a little bit of our story. So when you say we're no longer a startup anymore, I have to remind myself of that because when we founded this company, it was, 3 or 4 people. And we went on that path for almost 8 years before we took private equity money. And then from private equity money, my two co-founders left. And then we went on a different path, kind of the PE path of, acquiring companies and then ultimately rebranding from there. So yeah, it's been a journey. It's been, I guess it'll be the 11th year, going on the 11th year soon, but it's been a very blessed and wonderful journey as well. We've had a lot of success, so I can't complain too much. But happy to tell you more about it as we get into it.
Yeah, I have to know, the name is interesting, right? It's a new name. So how did you guys land on that?
Yeah. So we actually, if I told you the original company's name, it was P.E.s. PDF Kit. And if you can say that without stumbling on it the first time, you'd be the first.
I think we actually used that years ago, like that suite of tools. I think we did. That's how I recognized that. I did not know it was the same company.
PDF Kit sounds familiar, but I think that there might have been a lot of PDF kits or PDF readers to compete with Acrobat back in the day.
Well, so we originally started out of the mobile space, which I can tell you my background and how I got into that space, but it was an iOS framework, literally to view, annotate, fill out a form, sign it if you're creating a mobile application. And luckily we were super early to it. So we got some really big name customers like a Dropbox, a Box, IBM, SAP, some just really large customer names because we were probably one of the only solutions at the time on there, and everybody was late to getting to mobile. We were in this sort of PDF vendor space because, the first question we always get is, why didn't Adobe do that? Or how was it competing against Adobe? And Adobe wasn't there. They didn't have a developer framework at all. PDF Kit was a Mac OS framework. So Apple had it with Mac OS, and then they ultimately brought it to iOS in 2017. So they do have the iOS PDF Kit. But what you realize is they don't have a lot of people on this. It's not that great. And PDF is a very difficult problem to solve. So we came out of this kind of developer toolkit phase, and P.E.s. PDF Kit, if you remember Next Step, and if you know anything about macOS development, you have NS everything because that was what ultimately was the predecessor to macOS. And so the idea was, you took your initials, Next Step, and you put them on there and then named it whatever the thing was, which PDF Kit was the thing. And it was Peter Steinberger's PDF Kit. So hence P.E.s. PDF Kit, very, logical name for an iOS developer, I would say. And as we went from iOS to Android to web to backend processing to .NET and all of these other sort of wonderful frameworks, it didn't really last. People were very confused by it. They thought it meant PostScript, a lot
Or
of things
Photoshop.
that people ultimately, yeah, exactly. So needless to say, we had a lot of brand equity in the iOS space, and that was where, most of our revenue originated from. And so you'd be surprised, you go to WWDC and I don't know, 1 out of 3, if not 1 out of 2 waiting in the line knew who we were and knew
Cool.
the name. And so it was like, did we get rid of this? Did we change? And then obviously, as my friend so elegantly put it, after we took PE money and kind of acquired a couple of companies. He was like, I don't mean to hurt your feelings, Jonathan, but I don't think you can really go public with the name P.E.s. PDF kit. I don't think it's really good a job. And I laughed at him, but it became almost a crutch because I don't know, it's a very developer tool heavy name. Whereas, we weren't all also just in a developer tools name. But I'm not answering your question. So let me get to the actual question you asked. So why nutrient? If you look at all of our products that we do and the way we think about it, we're sort of building blocks or ingredients, if you want to call it. If you think about Intel, the whole original Intel Inside campaign and the idea that they're an ingredient that's part of something else. Everything we do, from our developer toolkits to even, our low code integration solutions, even to our workflow automation platform, is essentially being put into, I don't know, or being built on top of by a company. And so we thought that, okay, this building blocks. And then we thought about where are we in? We're in the document space. And so it's like, all right, we got this idea of what we call document ecosystems. If you think about, I don't know, you're at a business, you have all these documents, all this unstructured and structured data. Nobody really knows what's going on with it. They just collected it and they put it in ECMs and they keep going. And so we thought of us as like, all right, if we're the building blocks that lead to a more healthier ecosystem, what is that kind of corollary to? And then I wanted to create a name that was unexpected and not something that, somebody goes, oh yeah, you're a Docu SDK. Yeah, it makes sense. Of course you would be. That's exactly what I would name that company. And so we came with this idea of that's like macronutrients, and nutrient seems like a familiar word that everybody knows and in a good way, but nobody ever thinks of it when they think of a tech company. And so we thought it was a really good, unexpected name that once, the first thing you're going to do is like what you did. Tell me how the hell you came up with your supplement brand, tech company name. And that leads to me being able to give, it's an opportunity for me to tell a story around it. And so that's really why we picked the name. And we've actually, over the 3 months, I think it's done very well, both internally with our company, because we had a bunch of people from a bunch of different companies that didn't really feel like they were part of P.E.s. PDF Kit. So now everybody feels, hey, we're all part of this new beginning. And then externally, we're not a reseller of these other companies we bought anymore. Now we actually, okay, yeah, for the first time, I'm hearing your story, your company story, and it makes sense. Okay, once I get over the supplement part, yeah, I get this. It makes sense. We've had a lot of success with it so far.
I like it. I like that story too. It's always great to hear a brand story that goes from like the initial version to something a little bit more sophisticated and grown up, which you guys did. But it's also great to hear someone understand the concept of a company name and a logo are not the definition of who you are, what you do. They're just a symbol to recognize a company. So
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
cool.
But is that so 10 years ago, maybe at least 10 years ago, maybe 5+ years ago, when someone was advising you at regular startup guy to name your company, most people would have told you to be as literal as you can be for Google purposes, right? If nothing else, for Google purposes. And so you got just horrible names that were just super descriptive. No question, that's exactly what they did, because it allowed you to be Google. You could be found. They would search for
SEO.
whatever you were doing, and you would come up by the nature of your name, which is a powerful SEO thing. Do you think you're able to get away from that long-held truth, especially if you wanted the .com, right? Because Google is imploding right now in terms of not as a company, but as of their influence, right? AI and whatever. If nothing else, AI has started a conversation of what is life without Google, and people are finally answering it. For 20 years, if you would ask that question, you would have an existential crisis and fall over and cry and shake, right? If you're a small business, because Google was where your revenue came from. And now you can have that conversation. So do you think that you're able to be more successful with a name that has nothing to do with what you do on the face of it than you could have been 10 years ago?
There's like a long answer and a short answer to your question. One, because I don't know, I think about branding and I think about relationships with your customers. It's the same as it was at the basics of the foundations throughout time, right? If I do my customer, they have a good experience with me and I solve a problem, provide value to them, they're going to tell their friends about it. Right. And that sort of word of mouth marketing is going to be infinitely better than any sort of, I don't know, fake advertising I can do. And then even with advertising, how is Google finding me? If you think about the way the Google algorithm always was done, is it was an explore and exploit type algorithm. I'm going to send traffic to your site. If a person returns back to Google and says, this didn't help me, I'm going to ding you. If they don't return and you solve the problem, I'm going to up you.
You mentioned earlier that you guys were purchased by or invested in by a PE company. And for many people, PE is like the boogeyman of finance, right? It's these guys are corporate raiders, right? That's what they called them. You know, Pretty Woman, when Richard Gere this is the manliest conversation I've ever had. When he is talking about he was a corporate raider and he would buy your company and tear you apart. That's a PE, right? It's funny how
What does PE stand for everybody else?
Private equity. It's big money raised by lots of people. If you, Jonathan, you probably have a better definition than I do. But my point is you hear about the horror stories, you know, they buy your company, they either pump and dump and they give you a bunch of debt and then they sell you off so they made the money, or they buy all the competitors in an area. Like I've heard that dentists are a big deal where they'll buy all the dentists in an area and then they're all owned by one secret thing. They all have their own names and then they jack the rates up. Right? There's a lot of horror stories around that.
We were always this mix of growth plus, you know, margins to get a dividend. What I call a real business, you know, we weren't one of these, let's burn it and waste money and then we'll get to profitability at some point later on in the future. Any mom and pop will tell you that's not a business. That's, I don't know, an expense.
Hobby.
Something like that, right?
$1 hobby.
What happened in August of 2022 when interest rates jacked through the roof and really changed SaaS businesses and the software space, we were already prepped for it. So my relationship with Insight's phenomenal. I actually worry if I have another investor in the future, it can't be as good as this one I have right now. We've done very well in a time that software businesses have not done very well. So we've grown. We're still profitable. We didn't have to do mass layoff, you know, these sort of things. So I've been very, you know, happy to have them as a business partner. You know, they bring a sort of perspective. You know, they're thinking about the valuation of the business almost exclusively. They're not thinking about operating it. And so they're literally just thinking about, what does this look like? How can we grow this? How can we grow it in the best way that we can make money when they go to sell it on? You know, they're only focused on enterprise value. And that's different than when you're a bootstrap owner, that you're not thinking about enterprise value. You're thinking about that dividend because, like, how much money am I making this year is what you're thinking about. And so it's a different perspective, but a very healthy and I think valuable one. So I've been very lucky. I do know the horror stories. There are firms that literally only have roll-up strategies. They do massive layoffs and they create business value with it. There is something to be said for it. I don't know if I'd be very good as a leader or owner operator of one of those businesses personally. It's just not what gets me up in the morning.
Yeah, I've always wondered how those guys who, I think of Red Lobster, which was destroyed by a PE company, right? They bought them, saddled them with $1 bazillion in debt, sold all their land and said, have a good one. And the shareholders, the PE people, they made a mint and, you know, we lost a lot of Red Lobsters. And I'm just thinking, if that is your business model, you wake up in the morning and I'm going to buy this company that everyone knows and loves and just eviscerate it. How do you do that? I like the idea that PE or whatever, VC, all those fun acronyms, they're here to create value. They're here to make a company like yours better, not just roaring it to death and take money home. Like, how do you, I just don't get that mindset. And obviously that's not what your guys are doing, but man, I just don't understand how that works.
I'll defend them a little bit because I do think one of the things that happens when you have, let's say, an unsophisticated market or what they call a fragmented market, you have a bunch of people, and this is the way all early markets start. AI right now is a fragmented market. Everybody and their mother is coming out with an AI startup. This is going to consolidate. At the end of the day, it's like the dot-com boom. Everybody had a website, everything was doing. And then all of a sudden now Amazon is one of the main places people go for shopping. And I don't know, so this is what happens. You have in the beginning, everybody comes to it, everybody comes to play, everybody has an idea. And then a market gets mature enough where the actual value created is by consolidating it and you get efficiencies. A perfect example is if you have $10 million businesses that are all paying a CEO and a CFO and a CRO, all these sort of C-suite acronyms, management firms, but $100 million business, if all 10 of those combined could create the same revenue and only have one management team, you just reduce cost. It's a more efficient business and you created more shareholder value for the owners of that business. The problem is normally just rolling up a business doesn't equal, you get into this, I don't know, pricing arbitrage. So imagine I don't know, an apartment complex or a bunch of owners that own the individual apartments. Well, maybe if I have every person gets their own cleaning person that comes and handles it, and our own maintenance person that comes and handles it. If I combine all those into one thing and there isn't some sort of volume discount for getting a one cleaning service and one construction management, then I haven't really created any value. I just combined it all together. And this is where the bad stuff happens. So it's hard to know oftentimes what is like good operating teams are good operating teams, whether it's private equity, public funds, a public traded company, or a mom and pop store. There's some phenomenal owners that are, family owned businesses or bootstrap businesses. There's also some really bad operators that are family owned businesses. And so the whole idea is that just not all PEs created equally, not every mom and pop's created equally. There's something to the strategy of at a certain scale in a market that's fragmented, rolling it up, getting some operating efficiencies, doing it right is very hard. And normally, the other thing that happens when market consolidates is things go out of business. And so knowing which ones that are going out of business that you just bought, that you shouldn't have bought, or that should have just naturally gone out of business, all these things are hard to determine. And that's the reason good operators and good leadership teams are, I hate to say it, paid in compensation what they're paid, because normally they are better at delivering that sort of enterprise value. And at the end of the day, a private equity firm, most of the time, is literally just money. It's investment dollars with some sort of playbook or thesis, and then operators that execute that playbook and thesis.
So everybody gets mad about how much CEOs get paid. And for sure, a lot of them would get overpaid. But I always challenge that to say, how many people on the planet can run a company with 10,000 employees? And run it efficiently? There might be 100 living at any point in time. And so this isn't just you pick up a middle manager and promote him and he knows what to do or she knows what to do. They have a very unusual skill set that's probably useless outside of this very specific niche. And so if you're going to find one of those 100 people, who's going to run Apple after Tim Cook? Seriously, there might be 5 people on this planet who are capable of running a business of that scale. And of course, that person should be paid really well. Are they worth, but when you start looking at it and you say CEO compensation, that guy makes 4,000% more than his average worker. And okay, so if I'm going by the math, is that one person worth 4,000 of his employees? That's the question you're asking. And in some of those cases, as hard as it might be to say, the answer might be yes. Again, Tim Cook, rare thing, man. He navigated Trump. He navigated China. He did things that no one thought was going to happen. And he's turned that company into an absolute behemoth. Is there any legs to what I'm saying, or am I just being a jerk?
I'm gonna try to not sound self-serving, obviously. I invest my money, I invest in Forex trading. I do a lot of things outside of just running a company.
True.
And I would tell you, I've never beat this one rule. Risk correlates to returns. So if you want high returns, you need to take high risk. I think a lot of people see that and they see the winners and they don't see the risk that they put it. Elon Musk is a perfect example. Elon Musk he got 200 and some million from the sale of PayPal, and then he almost lost it all
And
between
Tesla.
Tesla and SpaceX. He literally floated the two companies with his last dollar and his friends investing in it to reach where he's at now. Jeff Bezos had a comment recently. They interviewed him. He's talking about AI, but they asked him about compensation because he kept his compensation, his actual equity compensation and his salary compensation the same. But obviously his equity just went through the roof. And if you look at Tim Cook's made money by his options he was given and his equity he was given in Apple. And he said, a lot of people look at companies not in, he looks in terms of how much money they made. But he goes, nobody looks like at a Forbes, top 100 or whatever, based on how much money did they make other people? How much value did they create? And obviously, Jeff Bezos said, if you look at how much value I've created something over $3 trillion or 2.7 trillion by creating Amazon for other people, not for myself, right? Yeah, there is two people in this world that's created that sort of value in their lifetime. Maybe in history it's different. I don't think it's all them. If you didn't have the US market, Amazon isn't worth what it is. If you didn't have the US financial market and people investing in it, if Apple wasn't part of the S&P 500 and the 401ks of so many millions of Americans were invested in them, they aren't the size and value of them as well. So there is some benefit of society and the market that you're selling into that these people get the byproduct of it.
Big Pixel builds world-class custom software and amazing apps. Our team of pros puts passion into every one of our projects. Our design-infused development leans heavily on delivering a great experience for our clients and their clients. From startups to enterprises, we can help craft your ideas into real-world products that help your business do better business.
Here's the argument there is, I'm going to use Apple only because I remember vaguely their numbers. They did a study that said that each one of their employees, their retail employees in particular, were getting, they get paid normal retail rates, but they were generating the company somewhere around like $140,000 per employee because they just, people would just buy stuff from them, of course, because it's Apple. And so everybody's, that's not fair because you're paying that guy $15 an hour or whatever, and he's making you. And it's easy to get stuck in that loop. It's easy to think about that. And you're like, it's not the dude just standing there in the store who made Apple 150K. It's the fact that they make these amazing products that people are clamoring to get that took that. And so you can't, I will say a lot of those companies, that's a value decision, right? There are companies that do amazingly well and make so much money that they do pay very well all the way down the line. But there are also companies that do extraordinarily well and keep it all at the top. There are examples of both of those. And that's a value decision, I think, that each company makes.
So my argument here, and then maybe this is because I'm trained as an attorney. I practiced law for 5-6 years. There's the Delaware and New York incorporation laws around what boards like job is to do. And, the corporation's job is to return shareholder value. And the thing that's crazy to me is people talk about this and they get in complaints. Everyone can own Apple. You can go afford to buy the stock. Go buy the stock, and as the stock appreciates, you benefit from the way they run their business as well. Same thing with Dollar General. So the thing that I don't get is why do we create a mechanism? And we get into this a lot, and I'll give you an Apple example. Apple became we're about privacy. And all of a sudden people were relying on a corporation to enforce privacy and not a society. It's the government society to do that. It's not the business's job to enforce employees' rights. It's the government's job. Look back to the Rockefeller days and things like that. The reason we don't have child labor in the laws is not because corporations decided not to employ 13-year-olds.
Sure.
It's because the government said you can't employ 13-year-olds. So people have an issue, I don't know, whether it be monopolies, whether it be employee rights, whether it be any of this stuff, go through your government. that's your place.
There's your
Like, go
mechanism.
tell them we should write. Yeah, and not because I think that is the one that is representing the voice of the country. Should be this democratic system. The voice of the company should be the voice of those shareholders. And if they break laws, they should get penalized for it. If they skirt around those laws and consumers find it to be bad for whatever reason, I don't know, ethical reasons or doesn't align with their political values, vote with your wallet. Don't buy them. You know what I mean? You can not decide not to buy their products. But I don't know, this idea that you're going to have the business be care about growth, care about employees, care about the society you're in, care about all these things. Come on. That's just not the way America was founded and what we set up in the economic system that got us to where we are. It also concentrates power amongst the shareholders of a corporation. I don't want Apple to decide, whoever the top holders of Apple are, to decide whether we have privacy or not. No, I want all of us to be able to say, I think privacy is important. 51% of us think privacy is important. We want, corporations to enforce privacy this way, or however system of government we have to do that. And so that's the thing that kind of bothers me when we get into these socially political or like conversations and expect a business to enforce socially political things. Isn't that what government's for? Isn't that what politics is for?
It's interesting, and not to go too far down the rabbit hole, but I think a lot of the corporations are taking it upon themselves because government is, for all intents and purposes, not functioning. Whether you agree yes or no who's in charge, it doesn't matter. For the last 10 plus years, whoever won, the other party decided our job is to throw gunk into the machine. And so nothing passes. So now you have corporations going, there is no such thing as an internet privacy law. So we're going to do the best we can and make money, because Google's stance is we're going to sell your data for whatever we can. That's if you buy a Google phone or use Google products, which of course I do, you are saying you can have my stuff. That's fine. And Apple's saying, but you can pay a lot more for this phone. And theoretically, you're as safe as we say you're safe, right? Because it's like you said, the corporation's making this decision, not necessarily the people who work, because our government has functionally been broken and no one's passing any laws one way or the other. And that's the much bigger conversation there.
Plus, the corporations have a big voice to craft those laws of the government with their
For sure.
wallet.
But
so, yeah,
the thing
in a
is
perfect
about
world,
lobbying,
the government would be able to protect the people from things that corporations do. But I mean, again,
what's
this is
interesting
America.
though is you have this lobbying effort, right? And corporations are corrupt and they're spending all this money to make the government go one way or the other. Sure, I'm not even arguing that. Well, because our government is broken, no laws get passed anyways. You can throw all the money you want at it, but no laws getting passed anyways. I don't know what happened, because your money just got thrown down. Now that you bought that senator, potentially, but that senator has no power to break the filibuster. And so no law got passed. So I don't know what happened to your money. It's a weird situation we're in because it's so broken. Like nothing gets passed except for naming of bridges. We haven't passed an actual budget, I don't think, since my son was born. It's crazy. He's 18. Like, it's crazy. Not a single budget. Anyway, we have wandered very far off.
Yeah,
Gary,
we
bring
should
us
reel
home.
it back in.
Bring
Okay.
us home.
With your experience, what would you give a new entrepreneur, a new startup, a new business owner as your top 3 pieces of advice for success?
Yeah, this question, I could go in a million different areas just because I feel like I've been doing it now and seen different phases. The first thing though, I think, and I've always come to this, and I am a big Steve Jobs fan, and, I'm a child of the 80s. So the Think Different campaign, I love that campaign. And I think this idea is, we're here for the people that, think big enough and think they can change the world, because they're normally the ones that do. That line really is stuck with me, because I think if you're going to decide to go into business, be an entrepreneur, be a business owner, start a startup, whatever it may be, there's going to be times where everyone's going to have doubt. What are you doing? Why are you doing this? What do you think? Just go do what everyone else is doing. And if you don't have that belief inside, that internal belief that, man, I don't know how, I don't know when, I'm not sure how I'm going to get above this, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to figure out a way to do this. That self-belief, I think it's so big, because it gets you through the troughs. It gets you through the times of self-doubt. So I'm a really big believer in this sort of, do you have this self-belief that you can make it happen? No matter what people say to you, no matter who tells you this or that, it's call it grit, call it self-belief, call it whatever you want. So I'm a big believer that if you're going to go into business, you need to find that. Um, the second kind of thing, and maybe this goes to if you can find someone else to go into business with, do. And at the same time, be very careful who you pick as your business partner because it's like a marriage. You're going to spend a ton of time with this person. You're going to go through good times and bad with them. You should set up structures to make things that, I don't know, make things as transparent as possible for you two or three or however many you have so that it's clear. Make sure you're aligned, both short term and long term. And maybe this is the attorney in me, but make sure whatever agreement you have, you write it before it gets emotional, as in before the decision needs to be made, whether you get bought out or this or that. But the reason I say ultimately find yourself a business partner is because this is really difficult to go about on your own. It's very lonely. You'll have a bunch of people that work for you, but they won't necessarily think like you do or have this stuff. And so oftentimes having someone aligned that you can vent to, share the burden with, super, super beneficial. And then the other thing I like to say, the third thing I'll give it is most business partners or most business owners, there's a book written in, I think, the 1980s that talked about that. It's like when you're actually building a business, you need to work on the art of building the business. So what does that mean? Most people are like the doers. I'm really good at this. Why am I working for somebody else and I'm doing this? So I'm going to go do the job myself. And then they find out, man, there's other parts to the job that they didn't think about other than just doing the work. So I tell a lot of people that are like, I don't know, I'm an engineer. I'm really good at building the software. Have you thought about marketing? Have you thought about sales? Because that also matters. And then at some point you want to scale this company where you need to think about not just whether I'm doing it and how I would do it, but how do I get a group of people to do that job? And I ultimately tell people all the time, you need to think about more than just what it is you're doing if you want to scale that business. And that can change over time. It changed. I was originally the everything but product builder. And now I'm doing everything but product building. I'm now managing. I'm a manager of managers. And I think ultimately what you have to think about is that system, because that business, you're building a system that's trying to do something. And so I like to tell people before you get into business, think about those things. Is that really what you want to be doing? Really self-reflect on, why do I want to go into business? What's the reason for? Because if you ultimately, what ends up happening is business owners get into business thinking it's going to be one thing and thinking they're going to do more of the thing they like. And then all the other stuff, I don't know, washing the toilets and, cleaning the toilets, things like that happen. And they find out, man, I'm not actually doing more of what I like. And then they don't know how to build a system so that they can only focus on what it is they want to do or what they think their strength is or things like that. So I like to, maybe to think long term before you get into business, but also think about what the actual job is that you're doing. I'll finish that with this. A lot of people say, if you want to be, I don't know, if you want to be a rock star, you better like practicing. Because it's not all about just being on stage and being the front man and doing rock shows and having the crowd. So if you don't like practicing day in and day out to get better at it, you're not going to make it as a rock star. And so really truly understand what it is every single day you got to do and whether you like that and you want that life before you go out to business. Sorry, I don't know. I don't know if those are helpful, but those would be my three.
No, those are great.
Those are
It
solid.
reminds me
Yeah.
when my son played basketball when he was a little boy, he was always jealous of these kids who were just so much better than him. Like, my kids just they weren't the stellar athletes. And I was like, they practice every day. And he's like, what are you talking about? And I say, that kid right there that you are enamored with, he probably shoots at least 100 baskets every single day. Every single day. No, he doesn't. Yeah, I bet you he does. And come to find out, he was the coach's kid. And of course, yeah, he was up doing drills and all this, that, and the other all the time. And my son made a calculated decision. I don't want to do that. And he never got any good. He stopped working. And I think that's funny how so many people think that person just has been given whatever, right? And the truth of the matter is they've worked really hard at whatever that skill is, whether the rock star or basketball player or business person, right? That person knows everybody in the city. Okay. How did it happen? They
Yeah.
weren't just
Overnight
introduced every day.
success, 10 years in the making.
Yeah, my favorite thing. It was how I built this Kickstarter. Everyone thinks we were an overnight success, but it took 8 years before anyone even knew our name. And I said that. Anyway, that was wonderful, man. Thank you so much, Jonathan, for joining us. This has been a lot of fun.
No, thank you guys. It's good talking to y'all.
Hi, I'm Christy Pronto, Content Marketing Director here at Big Pixel. Thank you for listening to this episode of the BizDev Podcast. We'd love to hear from you. Shoot us an email, hello@thebigpixel.net.